highly confident that when you go back and as a senior member of this administration, President Trump's administration, starting in the afternoon of the 20th of January of 2025, do you feel confident that you will be able to deliver the goods, that we can have serious prosecutions and accountability? And I want the Morning Joe producers that watch us and all the producers that watch us, this is just not rhetoric. We're absolutely dead serious. We're not. You cannot have a constitutional republic and allow what these deep staters have done to the country. The deep state, the administrative state, the fourth branch of government never mentioned in the Constitution, is going to be taken apart brick by brick. And the people that did these evil deeds will be held accountable and prosecuted, criminal prosecutions. Cash, I know you're probably going to be head of the CIA. But do you believe that you can deliver the goods on this in a pretty short order the first couple of months so we can get rolling on prosecutions?
Yes, we got the bench for it, Bannon, and you know those guys. I'm not going to go out there and say their names right now so the radical left-wing media can terrorize them. But, excuse me, the one thing we learned in the Trump administration the first go-around is we got to put in all America patriots top to bottom. And we got them for law enforcement. We got them for intel collection. We got them for offensive operations. We got them for DOD, CIA, everywhere. And the one thing we will do that they never will do is we will follow the facts and the law and go to courts of law and correct these justices and lawyers who have been prosecuting these cases based on politics and actually issuing them as lawfare. We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice. And Steve, this is why they hate us. This is why we're tyrannical. This is why we're dictators.
Well, there you have it. Steve Bannon, who leaves jail in the next couple of days, returns to his show in the next few days. Kash Patel, who may be in the next administration. You know, there's been a lot of talk this week about fascism, about Trump as a fascist. And we're going to get into that a lot in the show today. But my friend Ron Filipkowski, my fellow Midas Touch creator, actually our head editor, posted that clip that I had to show in the show today. Okay, when they get mad, we call them fascists, but they're literally talking about a fascist, attack on our nation. Let's even talk about the fact that if Patel really does get CIA, which is horrible, using the CIA to attack Americans. I mean, the list of insanity is too long to count. So I thought we'd talk a lot about that this week. I'm solo at home in my new studio. I hope you like the new studio. Kind of cool, right? And we're going to talk a lot about this. And a lot of it came out because of some big news stories that came out this week. And I wanted to talk a little bit about those. But, you know, one of the big parts of that fascist conversation was a conversation that John Kelly had at the New York Times. And here's a clip with that kind of leads us into this show.
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized hypocrisy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks will work better in terms of running America. You know, again, back to this issue of, democracy is complicated, messy to operate, probably the worst kind of government there is, except for all the other ones. I think Churchill once said that. And again, our Constitution, our founding is built in to the Constitution and to the way our government operates, built in a lot of checks and balances, and didn't design the government to be streamlined and whatnot. So, but certainly the former president is in the far right area, certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
That's his own chief of staff, former 4-star general in the Marine Corps, John Kelly, talking about Donald J. Trump. We got a lot to talk about this week on these things, so let's get on with the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Fred Wellman, host of On March, the FP1. We are right here in the studio, not the usual studio, our alternative studio, because I wanted to wait to the last minute because there was so much breaking news this week. I mean, I literally said to Matt, the producer, and God bless you, Matt, for being patient. You know, Matt, I don't want to do our show recording on Wednesday because there's just too much news. And I was right, as always. Well, I'm not always right. Let's be honest about that. But I was right about this. So I'm coming to you from our home studio today. I just want to talk a little bit about a lot of things going on right now because there's a lot going on. We're less than 2 weeks out, folks. By the time you watch this show, we'll be barely a week and a half away from the election. It's incredible. There's a lot to talk about. But let's circle back to those two big explosive news stories that came out this week. I know you heard about them already. I talked about it on Vote Vets. I know my partners here on my side, but I wanted you to get my take on these two huge stories. Of course, you know, there was the Atlantic article, which we'll talk about. The same guy, Jeffrey Goldberg, who wrote the story about the suckers and losers 4 years ago, which threw a wrench in my birthday weekend in 2020. And then, of course, he's written another one this week, which we'll talk about. And then we've got the New York Times interview with John Kelly, which is where the audio came from that I showed you. And I got a couple more clips from that. They put out, it was kind of clever, the New York Times. They did the interview, but also they did the audio clips, I'm sure with John Kelly's permission. Because, you know, our friends in the MAGA side are constantly saying, oh, that's not true. He didn't say that. You know, they wanted to get him on tape saying a few of these things. And a lot of those things he did say confirmed. He did confirm the suckers and losers comment. He did confirm other things that he said. One of the big things he said, and we'll talk a little bit more about this too, was that the weird obsession that Trump has with Adolf Hitler. He said to Kelly that, you know, hey, you know, Hitler did good things too. Apparently he said that several times. Here's Kelly talking about Hitler and Trump's love for Hitler.
He would he commented more than once that, you know, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, you know, sir, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason. And but he would occasionally say that.
What would he say when you would lay that out to him?
You just, that'd be the end of the conversation usually.
Yeah. You know, we've heard this other times. We've heard it last few times. It's interesting to hear Kelly actually talk about it. He's been he hasn't been terribly forthright and talk about these things publicly, but, you know, Hitler did good things. And we'll talk about what he said about Hitler's generals in the Atlantic article. There was more. And one of the shocking things, you know, the thing about Trump is commander-in-chief. And we've talked about it. Remember, a couple of weeks ago, our show, we talked quite a bit about Trump's activities as commander-in-chief in the military. I told you about how he skipped over for 2 years. I talked about some of the things how he's undermined his little public persona of loving the troops, which is, of course, bullshit. Let's be honest. You know, what we did see is the truth is that he doesn't care about us. And it really did show. One of those things that we'd heard rumors of for a long time that came out in that Atlantic article 4 years ago was that Trump didn't want amputee service members. Now, one of the things we've always honored in the military is those of us who got injured in combat. Now, we already know, you guys remember, we've talked about this. Trump doesn't like people who are captured. He's always smearing John McCain for that, right? He said it on July of 2015. I don't like people who are captured. So we always saw, you know, he also doesn't like people who got wounded. And this came up because early in his service as president, we had a young man who got lost his legs, I believe, in combat, and he would sing at a lot of events. He would sing the national anthem beautifully, by the way. I heard it myself. And I guess he did it one time, and well, Trump didn't like it, which is shocking. Now, mind you, he was very nice. There's pictures of him smiling and shaking the guy's hand, which is important for a later conversation we're going to have. But this is what Trump said about amputees and disabled people to John Kelly, his chief of staff. Remember, a retired Marine general.
Does he have disdain for the disabled?
certainly his not wanting to be seen with amputees that lost their limbs in defense of this country, fighting for every American, to him included, to protect them, but didn't want to be seen with them. That's an interesting perspective for the commander-in-chief to have.
Why didn't he want to be seen with them?
He would just say, look, it doesn't look good for me. So anyways, I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. If you're a psychiatrist, I guess you could take a stab at some of these questions, but I'm not.
Doesn't look good for him. He's always about what looks good. Remember, Trump is always talking about somebody coming straight from central casting. It's his favorite term. I love my big strapping generals came straight from central casting. This big guy who's never cried in his life. He had tears in his eyes. Trump lives life like he's sitting on a camera. Trump lives life like it's all a TV show. He lives in his own TV show, right? It is like the Truman Show. Remember the Truman Show? Except Trump in his mind literally is living the Truman Show. Everyone's got to have a look. He's got to look good all the time. Do you know that Trump, by all measure, everybody says his eyes have gone bad. He's 78 years old. I mean, my eyes went bad at 49, right? His eyes went bad, like they often do, which is fine. And he does wear reading glasses when he's reading documents, but he refuses to wear glasses publicly because it makes him look weak. One of the reasons he stumbles through his speeches, and if you remember it last week at the Al Smith dinner where he cursed and was vulgar at a Catholic Charities event, he struggled from the beginning because he didn't have a teleprompter. He had to use paper. Again, he doesn't wear glasses because it makes him look weak. Did you know he doesn't wear a wedding band? He doesn't wear a wedding band because he thinks that men who wear wedding bands look whipped. It's a true statement. He said that. That's why Donald Trump doesn't wear wedding bands. If you ever see, just now you hear it, now you know, you're going to look for it. He doesn't wear a wedding band because it makes him look weak, okay? So he decided that our injured, wounded service members made him look bad. And it does explain other things. So let's pull that thread. You guys love when I do this, I know. This is what I do. I pull thread. So when you pull the thread, who gave Donald Trump COVID in his mind? It wasn't the Amy Coney Barrett nomination party they had in the Rose Garden, an indoor event they had at the White House. No, Donald Trump blamed the Gold Star families. Now, many people didn't know there had been a Gold Star family event and of course there's Wounded Warriors there as well. We only found out when I was working at the Lincoln Project because they put the pictures up on their like Flipboard page, whatever that is, the photo page. But he had indoor event for the Gold Star families, the Wounded Warriors. Again, no photography, no cameras. Donald Trump didn't want to be seen around our Wounded Warriors. And John Kelly saw that. So that story came out. And of course, it went worse. But there's a second story that came out as well. And this one was very explosive. And this came from the Atlantic. Jeffrey Goldberg wrote it. Jeffrey Goldberg, of course, the same guy who wrote the article 4 years ago, which we all commonly refer to as the suckers and losers story. And that story was was sourced mostly by General Kelly, as it turns out, talking about Donald Trump's disdain for our service. We've talked about it a million times. Hell, I just got back from a bus tour, as you guys know, that said, I'm a veteran, not a sucker or a loser on the side of it, where we trolled Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. That's where that came from. Well, Jeffrey Goldberg put a news story out. And the news story opens with a shocking episode. And for setting this up, a young woman named Vanessa Guillen was kidnapped and murdered at was then Fort Hood, Texas, by her supervisor, who had been harassing her for quite some time, terribly. She's the child of Mexican immigrants. She was a wonderful kid, top of her high school class, from Texas, was serving in Texas, was miserable, and then disappeared. The Army then wasn't as, I would say, quick to go looking for missing soldiers. They would say, well, they've gone AWOL. They wouldn't look for them. Vanessa's family pushed hard. They ended up finding her body. She was murdered, burned. It was a terrible situation. It caused a lot of, it really was sort of, it was like the Me Too movement for the Army as far as this goes, that a young female soldier had once again been kidnapped, raped, sexually assaulted, sexually harassed by a male soldier, and the Army had not done enough about it. It became quite a cause celebre in April of 2020. April of 2020 was when? the height of the campaign season. You got to remember, this is when things were really heating up. My friends at the Lincoln Project, my former organization, if you remember, they came out with their first big ad, the Morning in America ad, in May of 2020. So April 2020, when Vanessa Guillen disappeared, was a very hot time. So, of course, Donald Trump was very worried about how things would look as he was trying for re-election. The last thing he needed was a problem with the military. After all, he was the commander-in-chief, strong guy, right? So he actually did invite Vanessa's family to the White House. And during that event, on camera, Donald Trump said, if you guys need anything, if the Army's not paying for the funeral or anything, I'll pay for it. I'll help you. Just reach out to me and I'll help you. And a reporter's noted it and asked him, well, have you done that before? And he made some bullshit. But he did say on camera, if the Army doesn't pay for all of the funeral, well, I'll pay for it. And then things unfolded where Vanessa's family decided they did not want to bury her in Arlington. So the Army paid for part of it. They don't pay for the whole thing. But she had a very big funeral, including a parade, I believe, in her hometown of Houston, Texas, with a private funeral. It was a pretty elaborate funeral for her because, again, she'd become quite a cause celebre for us in the military. But here's where the Atlantic story comes in. And I'll let Nicole Wallace take it from there because I think Nicole does a much better job of telling the story than I do. And, well, just watch.
There is some meticulously reported and stunning new reporting out of the Atlantic on the heinous racism and contempt for the men and women who serve and are injured and die serving our country in the United States military by the man seeking to serve as our next commander-in-chief. According to Atlantic reporter Jeffrey Goldberg, whose body of reporting on this topic is rock solid, Donald Trump, quote, erupted when presented with the cost of a funeral for a 20-year-old Army private, Vanessa Guillen. She was murdered at Fort Hood. Guillen is the daughter of Mexican immigrants. She grew up in Houston, Texas. Jeffrey Goldberg reports on what happened at an Oval Office meeting in December of 2020. Quote, at a certain point, according to two people present at the meeting, Donald Trump asked, quote, did they bill us for the funeral? What did it cost? According to attendees and to contemporaneous notes of the meeting taken by a participant, an aide answered, yes, we received a bill. The funeral cost $60,000. Trump became angry. Quote, it doesn't cost $60,000 to bury a fucking Mexican. He turned to his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and issued an order, quote, don't pay it. Later that day, he was still agitated. Can you believe it, he said. According to a witness, fucking people trying to rip me off. That's Donald Trump using the F word to describe a funeral that he had offered to pay for a member of the United States military. With 14 days to go, we apologize for the profanity, but we want to quote Donald Trump accurately and be faithful to this extraordinary body of reporting.
Yep, that's what he said, according to aides and notes. Look, I know a lot of things. I know good reporting when I see it, and Goldberg gets the goods, and he got the goods this time. Shocking story. And it goes on from there. They do. What's interesting about that story now, too, is that portion of the story, at least, is the Guillen family's attorney and her sister, Maya, are saying they're not denying that he didn't pay for the funeral because they did send him. He didn't pay the bill. According to the article, the lawyer does tell the reporter that he did not pay the bill. But the family, the sister at least, I'll just say this, the sister and the lawyer are defending Trump, saying that he was very nice to them and good to them. And they're saying the whole thing's a lie, but they haven't said what part's a lie. You know, the story does go on there from there. You saw the headline of the story. I could show you now. The headline of the story was pretty direct. It says, you know, you can see it. I need the kind of generals that Hitler had. And that's the other big chunk of the story. He talks about how he was frustrated with the lack of loyalty of what he felt was generals. He didn't feel like people stood up for him enough, or that they did. You know, he loves Putin. He's talked about Kim Jong-un. Like when Kim Jong-un comes in a room, they all stand up. He wants that from his people. That's, of course, the military does that, but I guess not enough people do. But he goes on at great length. And it's funny because I guess in the story, Kelly, again, General Kelly says, you do know that his generals tried to kill him 3 times, right? And Trump dismisses this out of hand because he doesn't know that history. Kelly kept trying to lean away, which is go back to that quote we talked about with Hitler. He goes, just keep leaning him away, that Hitler was a good guy, that Hitler's generals were good guys. Hitler's generals were not good guys. But also Trump has no idea of history in any way, shape, or form. He just, he knows what he wants. Those 2 stories alone are enough. but it's in the closing weeks of the campaign. I mean, we're within 2 weeks of the election, right? This is time for closing arguments. So these stories coming out, one, about how he talks about Mexicans, and two, the military, are shocking. So let's tell you what, let's take a break for our sponsor. We got Lumen this week. We'll take a pause of the Lumen, and then we'll come back and talk about the rest of this stuff. And it's, well, there's a lot to talk about.
Lumen's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guides to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even your stress management. Not that I have stress in my life. Now, all you have to do is breathe in your Lumen first thing in the morning. You'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe in before you go on your workouts, before you go for a meal. You know exactly what's going on in your body in real time, and Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. So look, your metabolism is your body's engine. We all know this. You probably learned this in health class, right? It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. I've been tracking macros and nutrients and nutrition for years as I try to maintain my health as I age. Because your metabolism is the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, better moods even, if you will. Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health right in your hand. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Fred. You'll get 15% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/Fred for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring our show this week. We really appreciate you. And man, it's a great device.
And we're back. Thank you, Lumen. So, that's why this phases in, these two big stories and everything's going in. It goes into a really important, and Pete, as always, I'm sure as you know, Trump attacked these guys for saying these things. He attacked John Kelly. He attacked the good people that, remember, he said he's going to hire the best people. And this is, of course, Pete, Pete Buttigieg can say it better than I can. So let's hear what Pete had to say about Trump's reaction to all of this in these closing weeks.
You obviously former military. What's your response to what Trump is saying to John Kelly tonight?
Well, of course, it's an insult to the military. It's an insult to veterans. But he's also telling on himself, right? One of the most important things that a president does is choose key personnel. Donald Trump has often claimed that he's good at that, which he would need to be in order to be a good president. He chose John Kelly. And not for some random appointment to some obscure board. He chose him to be his #1 advisor, his chief of staff, the most important official in the White House. And by the way, he did that because John Kelly has a reputation as a great general and a great leader. Let's also remember that General Kelly, his son, gave his life in the defense of this country. There's no question in who is credible between the two of them. Donald Trump, who's told more documented, provable lies than any modern American politician, or General Kelly, who is a person of integrity and who you can tell didn't do this lightly. I cannot think of another time in American history, certainly in my lifetime, when a president or a candidate for president was denounced by his own chief of staff. Again, this isn't some random liberal group saying these things about Donald Trump, telling these stories. We're talking about his own chief of staff and a whole bunch of other people, from his Secretary of Defense to his own vice president.
Does it give you any pause, though, that...
Right? I mean... That's the thing. I mean, as Donald Trump gets close to his hopefully last election and his second losing one, technically third, but let's not get into that. 40 of 44 cabinet level officials that worked for him are not endorsing him. His own vice president refuses to vote for him. His chief of staff is condemning him in news articles, calling him a fascist. You go on and on. And that's the closing argument phase, which no wonder they're panicking so much. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but X or Twitter, what you want to call it, is freaking nuts. And we'll talk about that too. But as we go into this, we are in what us political professionals call the closing message phase of this thing, right? And as they get closer, we're seeing that as discussion. I believe that Vice President Harris has scheduled a closing message speech, actually, on the Ellipse of all places, the same place that Donald Trump gave his January 6th speech, which I think is pretty cool. I think we all know that Donald Trump is playing on Madison Square Garden, which, of course, is the same place where the American Nazis met in the 30s. Quite a coincidence, I'm sure. You know. So we're in the closed message phase. And what are we seeing? The funniest part of the closing message phase we've seen so far is when Jason Miller went on TV and did an interview and said that a speech that Donald Trump had coming up in India, I believe it was Indiana, but wherever he was going to be, no, it was Latrobe, Wisconsin. Thanks. And Latrobe was going to be, you're going to see his closing message. And what did Donald Trump talk about for that speech? Well, if you remember, the first 15 minutes were about Arnold Palmer, where he wound up that phase of the speech, talk about Arnold Palmer's junk and the massive size of it. I guess that's Donald Trump's closing message, but there's more. And when you really dig into what the Republicans are saying across the country for their messages throughout this campaign, especially these closing weeks, it gets pretty crazy. Jessica Tarlov, of course, from Fox News, who we love dearly, she noticed this, and I'm going to tell you more about it myself.
The centerpiece of it. But there was data that I saw today that I found really interesting, that the number one topic that Republicans are spending money on ads is about trans issues. So number 5 was the economy. Number 1, all of this anti-trans stuff where they're saying Kamala Harris is going to give sex changes to undocumented people in prison. And that doesn't seem like the strongest message to end on a national campaign.
Yeah, anti-trans message. And actually, she leaves some key stats. I saw an article that showed, this is unbelievable, that Republicans have spent over $70 million on anti-trans ads across the country in Senate races and congressional races. That's not even including the Donald Trump ads. Here in Missouri, where I live, Josh Hawley has centerpieced his campaign. The centerpiece of his campaign, judging by his ads, 2 out of 3 of the main ads he's running here in Missouri have been about anti-trans bigotry and how his opponent, Lucas Kuntz, supports men and women's locker rooms. He had that reprehensible person, Riley Gaines, who blames a transgender woman for her loss when she actually took 5th and wasn't even in medal contention. She blamed her for her loss. She did an ad for Josh Hawley about anti-trans hate. You know, and of course, I already mentioned I'm talking about people's private parts. I mean, if you talk about them, their anti-trans stuff, you talk about Donald Trump and Arnold Palmer, these people are really obsessed with people's private parts. It's disheartening. And of course, the other ad that Josh Hawley ran here was racism, about the border. That's the other thing they're talking about the most, obviously, constantly hounding on the border. Matter of fact, just today, Elise Slotkin, big news, guys. This is going to shock. I hope everybody's sitting down as you watch the show tonight or listen to it. This is going to amaze you. But word is there's a 2,000-person caravan just leaving to get to the border before November 5th because they know that Joe Biden will let them in. Because, you know, it ain't an election without a caravan of illegal immigrants coming to take over the country. This is what they talk about all the time. You know, and it's just disgusting. They're going to launch this. As you know, they're going to launch their big deportation. That's what he promises, a deportation operation, which will use our states, our troops against people, all these things. And they're out there pushing it hard. Like I said, I already mentioned where Trump's going to be. I mentioned where Vice President Harris is going to be. Again, back to Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley came to the state of Missouri, did a grueling 3-day bus tour, y'all. 3 whole days in his home state, and then illegally parked the bus near one of our most busy shopping centers. An interesting story came out today showing that Josh Hawley, since we got elected to the Senate 6 years ago, has only visited Missouri an average of 6 times a year, often for just in and out the same day. We joke a lot. About Josh Hawley really being the senator for Virginia. This man literally has visited his home state just 6 times a year since he was elected. On top of that, you've got Tommy Tuberville, who got elected 4 years ago, and he's got his estate is in Florida. His home state, his home is a huge mansion in Florida. I mean, these guys don't even pretend to bother being part of their states. And then, of course, for me, the most reprehensible thing I'm seeing is Donald Trump's final message is the one we talk about quite a bit. And you see me on the show, is calling us the enemy within. You know, the real enemy is the enemy within. And he means us. He means people like you and me. He means people like my friends here at Midas Touch. He means people like my friends at the Lincoln Project, the enemy within. Adam Schiff, he names. He really talks about using U.S. National Guardsmen and troops against us. He has literally said, and I don't have the clip, unfortunately, that while China and Russia may not really be, and Iran really aren't our enemies, the real enemies are the enemies within. So it's shocking. The far left radicals. I mean, I don't know how many of you are far left radicals like I am, but here we are. And that's their closing messages. So look, we're not going to fall for it. Okay. Now, I mentioned a little earlier, I'm sure you're tired. Okay. I know we're all tired. And I know you've noticed that social media has gotten really, really bad. People very close to me have had to lock down their accounts on Twitter because it is so bad. They have tweaked. There's no question in anyone's mind that they've tweaked the algorithm. So if you are progressive and you talk about Vice President Harris or Governor Walz positively, if you attack Donald Trump, there is a flood of bots and trolls and MAGA. It feels like fake, a lot of it, because it's really interesting. Have you guys ever noticed a lot of people attack us? You go to their profile and most of their feed is about sports. Like they're really obsessed about a sport. And it's usually like one team. Like they're obsessed about a British football soccer team, or they're obsessed about an American football team or a random college team. But then all their replies and their DMs to me are hate and MAGA and Democrats, pedo, all the worst things you can imagine constantly. It's really interesting. It's sock puppets, it's bots, it's trolls. They're not being stopped. Matter of fact, they've turned up the heat. I noticed myself that I'll put out a post on Twitter, and about an hour or so later, there's a flood of MAGA hatred, almost like an algorithmic thing that they're fed the information to come after us. I spent 2 hours on Monday fighting off somebody tried to actually hijack my account. I got notifications they were in there. They locked my account for a while. They delegated, for those who pay attention, they delegated my account to their own selves. Luckily, we were bad because I got in using two-factor authorization so they could get me out of it. I actually got them out, changed all my passwords. So if you're on the right side of this thing, just be careful out there on social media right now. It's insane. But the good thing is I want to just make sure clear to you guys that we are less than 2 weeks out. And this is when the fight matters, folks, right? This is when we have to fight. And this is my closing message for you. It's very simple, right? They are purposely doing this. They're purposely trying to break our spirit. The flood of polls that show it being tighter than it is. Interestingly enough, by the way, as we have this conversation, the polls are bending back towards Kamala. In Michigan, she's up by 5 points now. So it's interesting. There's really good numbers in early voting. The early voting numbers in Georgia look fantastic. I got a nice note from a friend of mine earlier who has a friend there talk about how the early voting looks to them, and it looks really good. I think I can find it too. The fact is, we're getting great numbers there as far as, let's see here. Over 2.2 million people have voted already in Georgia as of today. A majority of them were women, and almost 350,000 of them are new voters in Georgia that didn't vote in 2020. We're on track to support our early vote numbers from 2020 soon, meaning that turnout seats. So in Georgia, this is this is a member of Congress, by the way. They're already seeing a larger turnout in 2020. They're going to surpass it. We're still a week out from the election, over a week out. So it's pretty exciting. On that, in this specific member's district, which was drawn to make it harder for her to win, Democrats are outvoting Republicans in every precinct except one. So that's incredible. Her purple districts are actually turning out to be blue districts. So it's really some exciting stuff. As far as seeing larger, I was concerned myself, to be honest, because there's larger Gen X and boomers. And let's be honest, my generation, our older generation, I'm Gen X. The older generation is pretty hardcore MAGA. A lot of them, they're actually physically more of them, and they make up the majority of the electorate. Therefore, they'll always have the highest vote, but they're seeing very good numbers for youth vote. So again, that's Georgia. That's pretty good. So Michigan, Georgia, we're seeing good numbers. So what does that all mean? Don't buy the bullshit, folks. They want us to be dispirited. Okay. They want you to be panicked. They want you to be scared like 2016. And look, that's because that's their thing, but they can set up their victory that way. If we get dispirited, we don't fight as hard. We stay home from the election. That's what they want. But we're not going to do it. Okay. We're not going to do it. Okay. I was spoke at a rally in Springfield, Missouri 2 days ago. I literally drove 3 hours to Springfield, spoke at this amazing rally, majority women candidates. We had Crystal Quaid. We had all the state delegates, all the candidates, majority of the candidates spoke at this rally in Springfield and are running in the Springfield, Missouri area are women. And it was amazing, right? And I have to tell a joke. My friend Jess Piper was there. If you know Jess, if you don't know Jess, you got to look her up. Jess Piper's amazing, and Jess is a rock star. She was the star of the show. I was the sideshow. But Jess and I were talking to the end, and I looked at my calendar. I looked at the calendar, the schedule, and we were ahead of schedule. If you guys have ever been to a political rally with multiple speakers, the idea of being ahead of calendar is shocking news. And I leaned over to Jess. I said, Jess, this is incredible. I don't think I've ever been to a political event where with this many speakers where we're actually ahead of schedule. And she leans back. She says, that's because it's put together by women. And I was like, oh, she's right. God bless women. So here's the thing. Now's our time. We're a week and a half out. Now we fight. As the lady at the top of the ticket keeps saying, when we fight, we win. You can hear it in your head, can't you? When we fight, we win. And when we vote, we win. And we have to vote. If you can vote early, you've heard me say this every week, vote early. We knock doors. This is a great time for you to knock doors. We talk to family, have uncomfortable conversations. My poor kids are being pummeled by me, telling them to vote. They have to vote, and they're doing it. It's time for you to get out. Wear your colors. Put your sign up, like my Coach Wald sign. I've got 2 political signs in front of my house. One says Madam President, and the other one says Veterans for Kamala. Okay, wear your cards, put out, don't be shy. Even if they're stealing them. I don't know if you saw the story out of Springfield, Missouri, as a matter of fact, where some folks got so sick of their Harris Wald signs being stolen, they put an Apple AirTag in it. And it turned out to be a young teenager, I think it was his mom, had 60 Harris Wald signs in the trunk of his car and got caught. They're stealing the signs. So we don't care. Put up a new one. And we keep fighting. And we keep fighting till the bitter end of this election, because you know what? When we fight, we win. And I feel good. And look, I have my moments. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm wore out. I'm tired. But the thing is, we have to keep fighting because our country needs it. We have to keep pushing to turn out. We have to get to turn out. Here in Missouri, the ballot is 2 pages long. There's like 12 amendments and like 12 judges. It's okay. Give yourself time to go vote. And people are turning out. When I just checked our list, our local library had 175 people in line. 175 people in line a week and a half out in Missouri. That says something. The fire is there. But both sides have it. So we who are progressives, who support Kamala and others, we have to show. And you have to vote blue all the way down. You have to do the research on your constitutional amendments. A friend of mine who's doing canvassing in Florida heard many people saying, well, they're going to vote for Kamala. They're not voting for the abortion amendment or the marijuana amendment. Here in Missouri, we have Proposition 3, the abortion amendment, and a lot of lies being told about it. Make sure you take time to get educated. Lots of sample ballots out there. Look online for sample ballots to find out about these initiatives. They're more nuanced than you think. Here in Missouri, for example, there's a casino trying to put a riverboat casino in the Osage River. Well, as it turns out, the Osage Indian tribe has been trying for years to get a casino built, and this casino decided to try and sidestep it. So while it sounds great to have a casino, what's the big deal? Unfortunately, it's going to undermine our Native American friends who deserve it before they do. Those are the nuances you need to know about. So I'm saying all this to you because I want you to get out there. Look, folks, we can do this. If you've watched the show for a long time, I've been saying for a year and a half, we are winning. And we can, and we will. And you know what? And the races that we don't win, you know what we're going to do on November 6th? Get back to work. That's all we can do. But right now, you've got a week and a half, folks. When we fight, we win. So this is a no hand-wringing zone. You know that, right? Even this new studio is a no hand-wringing zone. We don't do it here. We don't hand-wring. We fight. We use our hands to lift people up. We use our hands to grab by the hand, take them to the polls, because the only thing that matters now, folks, is getting people to vote. That's how we'll win. People ask me all the time, Fred, how can I help? Stand on the side of the road, wave signs? Great. Help a local candidate? Great. They may need money. We still have candidates looking for money to put ads up on TV. Great. But now, more than any time in history, go vote. Get your friends to vote. All right, I've beat you up enough for 40 minutes. Thanks for joining me on this special solo show. We're going to be doing more of these because I guess you guys like them, and that means the world to me. In the meantime, you know where I am. Follow us at FP Wellman on Twitter, and I'm still there. I'm going to put up the fight as long as I can. FP Wellman Official and other places. You know the show. We really appreciate you being here. We're doing some new stuff with these kind of shows like this. I hope you appreciate that. As always, you can find our YouTube channel is On Democracy Podcast. on YouTube. I'm going to be doing a lot more on there. I know I've promised you for a while, but as you can see, we have a new studio. So my plan is, especially as after the election, we're doing some new content, talking to some new people, some new voices you might not know as we ease away from the election, hopefully because of a victory behind us. We're going to do some new content. You'll find it on Democracy Podcast YouTube channel. So I would love for you to follow us there. As always, we're on Twitter and everywhere. So with that, I won't go any longer. Thanks for joining us this week. Get in the fight. Thank you for everything you do to save our democracy. I am Fred Wellman. This is On Democracy, FP Wellman. I really appreciate you being here, and we will see you again next week.